Hello all and welcome to another week of Intro to Algebra. Today we're going to start talking about converting forms of rational numbers. And this is an important topic, but usually I don't do direct notes on it, so that's why it's not in the packet. Usually it's just a full day of work time in-person class. But I thought I'd make some notes here, so if you want to print it and you have a printer, I encourage you to do that. If you don't have a printer, just like with the worksheet, if you don't have a printer, that's totally fine. Just do it, the notes and then the homework in your notebook so that you know where they are and you're not going to lose them. So either pause the video now, print, or get yourself ready in your homework notebook, and we're going to get started talking about rational numbers. So as a review, forms of rational numbers, all of them can be fractions. That's the difference. That's like the definition of a rational number. It has to be able to be written as a fraction. Now, students sometimes say that fractions and mixed numbers, when I ask for one, they'll give me the other. And usually that's fine, but it is important to note that these are not the same. If I ask for a fraction in some of these, I do want specifically a fraction, not a mixed number, or I'll want both, as you see in number 2 here. So it's really important to note that these are not the same, and fractions are all rational numbers, and mixed numbers have to have an absolute value that is greater than or equal to 1, because it has to be bigger than 1 in order to have that whole number in front of it and then a smaller fraction following. Now with decimals, there's 2 types of decimals that are rational. The first one is called the terminating decimal. So terminus, if you remember your Latin, means end. And so a terminating decimal just means that it has an end. So an example of this would be something like 3.625. And it has an end here, meaning it has a last spot where it stops. And that's really helpful in terms of turning things into fractions, because what that tells us is that this is called the in this case, 1,000ths. Here is the hundredths place, the 1/10ths place. And all of those can be turned into a fraction, as we see, like this would be 625 over 1,000. Now, repeating decimals are also rational, and repeating means that they are infinite. So not all infinite decimals are rational. For example, pi is irrational. But if it's infinite with a pattern, then it is repeating and it's rational. So a prime example of this would be 0.33333, so on and so on. This is a rational number. It repeats with a pattern. You might also write it 0.3 repeating with a bar across it like this. And as a fraction, this is equal to 1/3. So let's talk about decimals and fractions before we go down here to the bottom and talk about percents and percentages. So convert into a decimal. Now there is a strategy that will always work. Like long division will always work. And then I'll show you a neat little trick that's helpful. So if you are asked to turn something into a decimal, you can always use long division. So in this case, that means 40 divided by 6. There's not enough decimal places, so we want to add in a decimal point here. Give ourselves some more zeros to play with. 40 goes into 60 once. So that's 1, where it's then on top of the 60. 40, 20, bring the 0 down. 200, that goes in 5 times without a remainder, so that's the end. So long division, 0.15. Sometimes, though, you can be sneaky. So long division always works. Sometimes you can be a little sneaky. And so here we have 6 over 40. That's the same as 3 over 20. Now, as we talked about here with terminating decimals, if you have something that's a power of 10, so 10 100,000th, if you can make your denominator a power of 10, that can be really helpful. So here, I'm going to multiply both of these by 5. And you can do this with multiplication and division, just like here we divided both of these numbers by 2. That ends up with 15 over 100. So that means the decimal point is in the hundredths place there. And we end up with 0.15, same answer with both methods. Now, being sneaky about it totally works, but it only works in that you can multiply or divide to a power of 10. So if this was something like 7, it wouldn't work because 7 can't be multiplied to a power of 10. Now, in number 2, convert 1.27 into a mixed number and a fraction. So again, they are different. We're asking for 2 different numbers. Now here, this is a terminating decimal that ends in the hundredths place. So that tells us that as a mixed number, we're going to have 1, the whole number, and 27 over 100. So you've got 1 as the whole number on the outside of the decimal, then 27 over 100 like this. So that's the mixed number. As a fraction, we multiply 1 times 100 and add 27. So 1 times 100 is 100 plus 27, all still over 100, which is equal to 127 over 100. So neither of these can be simplified. You can leave them just like that. So I'll illustrate again. Mixed number, fraction, and if I'm asking for one type of number, I do want that specific type because we want to be able to change back and forth. Now here, again, in number 3, convert into a mixed number and a fraction, and what you'll see here is that we have this bar across the 2 and the 7, which means that it's repeating. And what that means is that instead of putting a power of 10 in the denominator, instead of 10, we're going to put a 9. So if I look at the example over here, 1/3 is 3/9. So we take our repeating amount here, and that's the numerator, and then the number of digits is the denominator. So in this case, we have 27 for our repeating part, and the denominator, there's 2 digits, so it goes 99. So again, we have the denominator is repeating 2 digits. So there's 2 repeating numbers, so there's 99. So it's 1 and 27/99. We always want to simplify because both of these are then divisible by 9. So as a mixed number, we get 1 and 3/11. So that's our mixed number answer. And then as a fraction, we have 1 times 11 plus 3 over 11, which is 14/11 as a fraction. So the repeating one is generally the one that's new to students. Now, let's talk about percents and percentages. So the main thing with a percent or a percentage is that if we look at the word cent here, like centimeter or cent in a dollar, that means out of 100. So per cent is per every 100, just like you'd see like per mile. In this case, so if we have something like 35%, that's 35 out of 100. Now in number 4, it says convert 3 1/4 into a decimal. Since it says it wants to go into a decimal here, I'm going to start by changing the number into a decimal. So in this case, 3 1/4. This is 1/4. Hopefully many of you do know as a decimal is 3.25. If you don't, you can use long division or you can multiply by 25 to make it out of 100. Then when you make it out of 100, divide by 100, and remember dividing by 100 moves the decimal place 2 spots. So it's point, and we fill that missing spot in with a 0. 0.0325, and we like to put a 0 in front like so. Now here in number 5 for our last one, it says convert into a fraction. So let's start by making this into a fraction. Notice it's a mixed number, and as I've said several times now, they are different. And so this becomes 3 times 3 plus 1 as a fraction, which is 10/3%. Now, since I'm dividing by 100, dividing or over 100 just means put 100 in the denominator. So this is then 10 out of 300. We've dropped the percent when I've added in the 100, because if you look at the example, we either have percent or we have a 100 in the denominator. We have a percent or a 100, a percent. Now we have the 300. Simplify both of those by 10, and this is 1/30. Again, you have a worksheet for your homework. If you're stuck on any, please let me know, and I am happy to help you with as many problems as you have questions on. You just gotta let me know.